Over the past 5,000 years of human history, there have been no wars on Earth for only 292 years. And since the end of World War II, humanity has had only 26 days of peace. Wars have taken 3,640,000,000 lives. That's almost half of the world's population today. War has always been an integral part of the consumerist format of society, in which profit is the primary value, and war is the instrument to achieve it. War is a business, the most profitable business. Wars are fought over resources, new markets, territories, money, and power. Who do you think benefits from this? The nations that don't even have the money to fight these wars? No, it only benefits the corporations that have become so powerful they de facto run our nations. They are interested in continuous income, so they need endless wars. And do you know who pays for all this? Do you think it's them? No, it is paid for by all of us people. Remember, wars don't happen. They are created, and created ahead of time. Wars are planned decades before a direct armed confrontation, and the fighting is just the culmination of this plot. Starting a war requires convincing the public of the necessity of the war and of the right to a preemptive strike to avoid possibly worse consequences. Accordingly, anyone who wants to start a war will try to convince the public that war is necessary to improve the deteriorating situation within the country. Anyone who tries to start a war must convince the public that it will be easy and that the victory will be swift, inevitable, and inexpensive. In practice, this means convincing people that the cost of the nation will be small and the risk of escalation will be controllable, and the likely outcome can be easily anticipated. To achieve these goals, 10 simple but very effective techniques are used. Their effectiveness has been tested over the centuries, tested in more than one war from the time of the Sumerians to the present day. They guarantee a result without fail, and so they are used by both the aggressor and the victim side. Now, you will hear them and finally learn how even the most peace-loving man is persuaded to wage war. 10 principles of military propaganda. The first principle: we don't want war, we defend ourselves. To conduct war propaganda, the first thing that you must do is convince your own people that we didn't want war. It is the others, they, who have started the war, or are planning to start it any day now. We, on the other hand, are forced to defend ourselves. The use of this principle can be seen in almost every single war. The main thing is to convince people that the bad guys hate us and have already started or are prepared to start first. A suitable political assassination, an attack, an act of terrorism, etc., can be tucked in as proof. Feeling revenge is a simple and effective way to channel citizens' rage. The second principle: the enemy alone is responsible for starting the war. The third principle: the leader of the enemy is the devil and truly evil. The enemy gets a face, and it is now the object of hatred. It is not necessary to force hatred of the entire nation. The image of the enemy is personified in order to show its population that the head of the leader or of the others is a mentally ill, deranged, and corrupt man. The fourth principle: we defend a noble cause, not private interest. The economic and geopolitical goals of the war are carefully disguised. the defense of moral values, democracy, freedom of the nation are brought to the forefront. That is, the goals of war are noble: to save the people from suffering, to destroy terrorist bases, to prevent the spread of weapons of mass destruction, or overthrow a bloody dictatorial regime. The fifth principle: the enemy is brutal. Stories of the enemy's atrocities are one of the critical points of propaganda. Only the enemy commits atrocities. Principle 6: we don't commit atrocities. We go to war like knights. We fight by the rules. The seventh principle: hide our own losses and exaggerate those of the enemy. The eighth principle: this principle involves the creative and scientific intelligentsia in supporting the war effort. The ninth principle: religious idolization of the war effort. Slogans are used. Our cause is holy. God is with us. The enemy will burn in hell. The 10th principle: extreme conviction. Whosoever questions our propaganda is abating the enemy. You are either with us or you are against us. Any opposition is excluded. The leader of the country is identified with the whole country. The interests of that leader are the interests of that country. If you are dissatisfied with our leader, you are against the country. The effectiveness of these principles is guaranteed by the total monopolization of the media, which makes it impossible to obtain information from other alternative sources. Thus, verifying the reliability of this information being broadcast becomes almost impossible. Weakening of the victim. In addition to the ideological conditioning of the population, work is also carried out to weaken the victim. Depending on desired results, methods of weakening can be applied in stages or simultaneously. For your safety, we recommend that you memorize them. A typical tool that is used is a color revolution, followed by a country's leadership change, the appointment of a puppet government, destabilization of the economic and political situation, and plundering of the country's assets and resources. Modern armed conflicts increasingly use hybrid methods of warfare long before active military action begins. The aggressor state secretly, without a formal declaration of war, destabilizes the administration apparatus, the economy, the army, and even the cultural sphere by introducing to the people, as well as the rules and norms in the country of the victim, to the advantage of that very aggressor. An essential component of hybrid warfare is dragging the country into debilitating military expenditures by creating local conflicts in bordering and strategically important regions. These so-called gray zones are created by separating part of the bordering territories from the country through armed clashes and creating separate republics, which subsequently exist for decades and are points of conflict escalation. Gray zones are like red buttons around the world that can be pressed at any time to unleash an armed conflict. And even the signing of a peace treaty does not guarantee peaceful life in these zones. Today, any territory in the world can become a gray zone just because someone benefits from it. And when all the conditions have been created, one spark, one provocation is enough to start full-scale hostilities. Such a provocation can be shelling on the border, assassination of a prominent political figure, you name it. Of the U.S. military, I declare that war is the most terrible phenomenon in our society. It leads to the destruction of human lives individual cities and entire countries. In effect, the severing of supply chains and the destruction of production facilities and infrastructure set the nations back decades, if not hundreds of years. But if for some people war is a misfortune, for others, it is an opportunity to make money, as cynical as it may sound. And the primary source of revenue in war is armaments. Global military spending is rising for the 7th year in a row, reaching $2,113 billion in 2021 alone. That means that someone is constantly preparing for war or already engaged in warfare. It is essential to understand that weapons buyers are mostly countries, but the sellers are mostly private companies. So how does a manufacturer manage to convince governments to buy their weapons? The fact is that decisions in most countries are made by politicians, while the principal customers that make such requests are military industrialists. As a rule, schemes to bribe politicians and lobby for decisions and laws are used to ensure that decisions are made in their favor. Thus, the state serves the interest of arms manufacturers. And companies in the military sector are interested in keeping the war going, because if the wars stop, they will lose their multi-billion-dollar businesses. Simply put, the more military conflicts on the planet, the more profits corporations make. Why is it possible to carry out such deals and remain unpunished? Because it is all hidden under the national security seal, and the participants are protected from scrutiny. The mere expediency of producing weapons as a commodity already raised many questions. Not only do we continue to spend resources on inventing means of killing each other, but we also continue to produce something that will be destroyed one way or another. It doesn't matter if it is one bullet, $1 bullet, or a $13 million missile. If someone wants to get rid of money, why not make fireworks? At least they're pretty. Even better, invest in healthcare, technology. After all, the same MRI machine costs much less than missiles. Only a missile kills while an MRI machine helps save lives for decades. Imagine how much good would do people if the money for one cruise missile was spent on 13 MRI machines instead. Armaments are not the only lucrative scenarios. There are others. Every war has another side, a shadow side. Human trafficking and exploitation in various forms are carried out under the guise of war. Forced labor, including sexual exploitation, slavery, and the forced removal of organs. People who participate in such schemes and benefit from it are also interested in the continuation of war. The production and trafficking of drugs, the profits from which go to maintain and finance the conflict by corrupting officials and infiltrating the ruling circles of government, are increasing sharply. Taking advantage of martial law, enterprises and industries, private property and businesses are being nationalized, assets are being frozen, and bank accounts blocked. Other people's property is easily seized under simple propaganda. It's not enough to accuse a company or a business owner of collaborating with the enemy, and all assets are immediately taken over by others. In times of war, it is possible to eliminate a competitor without hindrance or to destroy the production capacity of a business or industry. As a result, the right people take over large and important companies. Profit is extracted from everything. For the first time, global military spending exceeds $2 trillion annually. That means governments have paid $2 trillion of our tax money to various corporations producing weapons and military equipment. At the same time, people are being persuaded that the increase in spending is due to the country's need to strengthen its defense. But in reality, behind this is the desire of corporations to make even more money by expanding their markets. Simply put, the more military conflicts on the planet, the more profits the corporations make. There is an even greater reason why war in the current format of society will never stop. And this reason lies in the very essence of the consumerist format of economy. For the economy to continue to exist, it periodically needs a reset created by war. In order to continue to function, today's economy must continually grow. If there is no growth, there will be an economic crisis that will lead to inflation and rising prices, unemployment and impoverishment. This happens because the economy is overflowing with money not backed by commodity production. As a result, money loses value, prices rise, and inflation accelerates. The economy is built in such a way that money and capital are constantly flowing to a small group of people who owns the majority of the world's wealth. At the same time, the rest of the population is getting poorer and world demand is falling, which stops the economy's growth and creates another crisis. The economy comes to a standstill. Everything is there, but most people cannot buy food and necessary goods. People find themselves in unbearable living conditions. Discontent grows and uncontrolled protests erupt, threatening the loss of power to a small group of individuals. In order to retain their power, a war mechanism is launched, necessitated by the need to reset the economy. How does war relate to resetting the economy, you may ask? War requires increased production of weapons, destroys the infrastructure and industry in countries where hostilities begin, and consequently frees up markets for the corporations owned by this small group of people. Why destroy entire cities? Infrastructure, communications, resource extraction facilities, and the energy complex, all in order to redistribute spheres of influence and make money on that reconstruction. That allows them to increase their capital even further, expanding their spheres of influence and increase their control over the population. The war in the consumer format creates the conditions for a small group of individuals to continue to get rich. The only thing is, we 99% of humanity pay for this. Not only do we pay for the war with our lives, but we also sponsor it ourselves by paying taxes and buying all kinds of goods and services. After all, the prices of goods includes taxes that go into the national budgets from which loans for military expenditures are repaid, which not only we, but even our children and grandchildren will have to pay for. We could have chosen to spend this money on equally expensive but peaceful projects, finding a cure for cancer or solving the hunger problem. But no one is asking people. More than anything else, war demonstrates that people are subservient and slavery has not disappeared. In our consumerist format of society, war will never stop. It is a part of the economy, a means of increasing capital and strengthening the power of a small group of people. In the consumerist format, it has always been and will always be so. So how to break this vicious circle? Not paying taxes will not fix the problem at its root. By buying any goods or service, we contribute to the economy of the consumption format, the economy of war. Neither can we stop buying. These are the conditions of a consumer society. If we do not change the format of our society and the present-day economy, wars will continue. So the only way out is to change this model of society from a consumerist society to a creative one, where the economy will be stable and aimed at ensuring a quality of life for every single person. The whole society will make decisions on socially important, socially significant, and economic issues. When conditions in society change and the economy's functioning changes, wars will simply cease to be necessary. So I ask you, stop the war, support the creative society.